Howdy, it's the red, white, and blue Jew, aka Jake Donnelly, and this is today's Kvetch. Jewish grit, American truth, and zero apology. Now, there are two things that I must talk about today. One, unfortunately, welcome to the Third Intifada. And number two, the abject failure of Jewish leadership. And today's Kvetch is going to take on both of those things because they are completely and utterly intertwined. So let's get to that right now. So first off, what's an Antifada? An Antifada is a violent uprising. However, it's only been the Israelis who have had to deal with the first two Antifadas. The first Antifada was from 1987 to 1993, and that resulted in the murder of 160 Israelis. The second Antifada was much more violent, and that resulted in the murder of more than 1,100 Israelis and included such heinous, barbarous acts as the Sparrow Pizza bombing. That act, which was actually orchestrated by a Palestinian female terrorist, that murdered 15 civilians and injured 130 others, including 15-year-old American Israeli Malki Roth. So those were the first two Antifadas. But what we're dealing with right now is the third Intifada. And that is not just from coast to coast in the United States of America. That is globalized. It has made its way around the world, and it is running faster than Usain Bolt on crack.
Is there no one on this planet, Tom Hannon, to challenge this young man?
This globalized third Intifada is in places like Australia, where they're chanting, "Fuck the Jews." Fuck the Jews! Fuck the Jews! It's in places like Amsterdam, where they're instituting pogroms because an Israeli soccer team had the audacity to play a match in Amsterdam. It's in places like France, where they're burning and yelling, "Free Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine." But it's also here in the United States. It's in the universities and the campuses. It's at Harvard University, where they're chanting, "Globalize the Antifada, Antifada revolution." It's at UCLA, where Jewish students aren't allowed to go to class.
Now, if you excuse me. Excuse me. I'm trying to enter.
But really, this third Intifada, which isn't just not in its infancy or its childhood, it's past puberty. It is more than 18 years old. It can drive, it can drink, it can smoke, because it is a full-fledged adult. This Intifada, the third Intifada, has been globalized and it has been viralized. It is on social media and it is everywhere you look. And what happened 2 weeks ago in our nation's capital was really the start of the third Intifada coming home to roost for the Western countries, especially the United States of America. And what makes the third Intifada so special is that after murdering a Christian in our nation's capital, and after murdering a young woman from Kansas in our nation's capital and yelling "Free Palestine," mopheads like Guy Christensen will go online and not just justify what he did, but cheer it on, excuse it. So this third Intifada is not just in real life, it's on social media as well. And it's legacy news organizations that are playing along. And that's where this really gets dangerous. So you can have something like what happened over Saturday night, where a report came out that Israeli soldiers had murdered more than 30 Palestinians while they were trying to get aid. But they reported that without a shred of evidence, nothing to corroborate that claim. And then when videos come out also not corroborating that claim, whereas the only videos that came out were actually videos that refuted and dispelled that claim, you did not get a single apology from any of these news organizations and quote-unquote journalists who propagated the blood libel. So you don't get it from the Washington Post. You won't get it from the AP. You won't get it from, of course, Ryan Grimm and Dropsite. You won't get it from all of the people who propagated this blood libel. And for those that don't know how dangerous a blood libel is, well, within 24 hours, we saw what happens when you propagate and spread a blood libel. When you spread a blood libel, you get blood. That's why a man in his 50s with his shirt off in Boulder, Colorado, could start tossing a bunch of Molotov cocktails at a group of 70-year-olds. And again, people will cheer it online. Or if they don't cheer it, they'll call it a false flag. Now pay attention for everybody who keeps thinking that these things are a false flag, because how in the world could somebody do something so heinous and then not run and not hide? It's because you're cheering it. They are proud of these actions because you guys tell them Antifada revolution, free Palestine. They're doing exactly what you are asking them to do. They are trying to, quote unquote, free Palestine. They are, in fact, globalizing the Antifada, both in person as well as online. So that's on you. But there's also another group who is to blame for this. And as somebody who believes in personal responsibility and accountability, this one hurts, but it's true. It's also on the Jews. It is on the abject failure of Jewish leadership to have not been prepared for this, and then, in response, to do absolutely nothing of note to help the Jewish community, both in America as well as around the world. Over the weekend, the New York Post put out an article that detailed in just absolute horrifying detail how bad the failure of Jewish leadership has been. Now, to me, this was the least surprising article I have read in some time, because I have been one of those who have been banging the drums about the failures of Jewish leadership. Because everywhere I look, I talk to teenagers, I talk to college and university students, and you know what I see? I see nobody helping them. I see people who are more interested in going to their $1 million galas than they are in actually helping young Jews on the ground. And to me, that's despicable. And when I say they won't help young Jews on the ground, I mean, look at Harvard University. You guys wouldn't believe how many Jewish organizations actually exist in Boston and the Boston suburbs. And yet, how could MIT and Harvard and Boston University get so overtaken when all of the Jewish organizations are a stone's throw from those campuses? It's because the Jewish leadership, the Jewish leaders, they don't actually have the intestinal fortitude in order to combat it. That's why there has been no combating of anti-Semitism here in the United States. We can go all the way back to the Joe Biden national strategy to counter anti-Semitism, which included CARE, the Council for American Islamic Relations, which is an anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist organization that was included in the plan to counter anti-Semitism during the Biden administration. I tried to talk to as many Jewish leaders and organizations as possible, and nobody would listen. In fact, many of the Boston Jewish leaders and organizations went down to D.C. to applaud the plan, and how good does that plan look now? I did a video on the plan. I listed things like how many times it says anti-Semitism versus how many times it says anti-Zionism. Once. It says anti-Zionism once. But don't worry, it talks about Islamophobia or Islamophobic more than 20 times in that national strategy. And the Jewish leaders, they thought that national strategy was absolutely something to support and get behind and push. These are the same Jewish leaders who, by the way, on the anniversary of October 7th, thought it was a good idea to stand with an anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist congresswoman from Boston, as well as an anti-Semitic and anti-Zionist Jewish organization called If Not Now. That's what they do. They care about their image more than they care about fixing the issue. And you don't even have to be Jewish to recognize the failures of Jewish leadership. There's a story from Newton, a suburb of Boston. A guy by the name of Scott Hayes, an American veteran who is at all of the rallies in this area. he was attacked from behind by an absolute piece of scum by the name of Caleb Gannon. And do you know how many of the Jewish organizations helped out Scott? Because Scott had the audacity to stand for Jews and to stand for Israel's? One. And even that organization wasn't too loud and proud about it. Of all the Jewish organizations in the Boston area, only one stood by Scott Hayes, who, as of today, is going to go on trial in 16 days because he had the audacity to defend himself. And that brings me to another point that Jewish organizations and quote-unquote leaders need to figure out. If you are a leader of a Jewish organization and you hate this type of shirt, if you hate Jews who want to actually defend themselves, be a part of the Pew Pew Jew Nation, if you hate that, look, you don't have to support it, but you have to get the fuck out of the way. Because if your response to all of this Jew hatred is to try and actually take guns and the means to defend ourselves out of the hands of Jews, then you are not being a Jewish leader. You are anti-Jewish. And you might be a leader of an organization that calls itself Jewish, but you're not a Jewish leader and you're not a Jewish organization. Because if you think right now is the time to attack the Second Amendment, a time where Jews need as much protection as possible, and you want to come out against it, that's not being a leader. That's being an enemy right now. And you need to deal with that. And if you had any respect for the community that you purport to represent, you would at least be quiet. And none of you have stepped down. None of you. That's why we need a new crop of leaders. Yes, I'm arrogant enough to say, hey, I should be a part of that. But what I really want is a Shabbos Kestenbaum. What I really want is an Emily Austin or a Montana Tucker or a David Draymond. I want us to think of new ways in order to reach younger Jews who have been neutered by the failed leaders in their areas. That willingness to fight. I want Samsons, we've got Sallys right now. There's no Shimshon. It's just people who look at a gun and think that the gun is an issue, as opposed to the fact that you haven't taught young Jews how to defend themselves better. So organizations like Stand Strong, that is where you need to put your money into now. Organizations like Project Max, which uses sports to reach across aisles and do tremendous work. That's where you need to put your money. So I'm talking to you, Jewish philanthropists, who have continued to give your money to these organizations which have proven to fail. Why would you do that? You people who are some of the best business minds in world history, if you ran your business the same way that these Jewish legacy organizations are run, would you give any more money to that business? Or would you think that business is an abject failure? Because every single one of them says, we work to combat anti-Semitism. And they've been around for decades, if not a century. And yet they continue to get your money when that money has been wasted. It has been thrown into a bonfire and burnt up. So the question I want to ask everybody listening today, don't you think the old way has failed?
I'm ruined!
I mean, I've been called arrogant. I've been called egotistical. Dare say I've been called a narcissist. But if I was in any of the positions that these leaders have been, and I saw how badly I botched something, somebody who believes in agency, accountability, and personal responsibility. In other words, somebody who believes and acts out Jewish values. If I saw how badly I messed something up, if I saw how badly I botched my leadership position, I'd resign. And I'd tell you exactly why. Yet we don't see it. So in my opinion, there's only one way through this. And that is, take all the money that we have, take all of our philanthropy, and find new and better ways to do it. Support Shabbos Kestenbaum and PragerU. Support Eric Rubin and Project Max. Support Stand Strong and Natan Levy. Support these people who are thinking of new and different ways to try to strengthen our Jewish youth. Because unfortunately, the previous generation, you guys messed up.
You fucked up.
And you didn't mess up like a little bit. You tripped over the atomic wire and blew up everything. And now the worst part is that you won't get out of the way. You won't recognize that you've messed up. Essentially, you won't repent and you won't atone. You won't act Jewishly right now. And I dare make a conjecture as to why, so I'm going to leave that be. But all I want to say is, even though we're in the midst of the Third Intifada, we can do this. We have strong voices, younger voices, more dynamic voices, more charismatic voices. Voices who have said, you know what, like Lizzie Savetsky, fuck you.
I'm Israel, hi! I'm Israel, hi!
Because sometimes, fuck you is the appropriate response. And if you don't like that, well, fuck you. You guys brought us to this point. You are the reason we're in the Third Intifada, not us. You guys brought this to our shores, and now you're telling us to fight without any guns, both in actual physical guns as well as on social media and everywhere else where this battle is taking place. So please, I implore you, I beg of you, get out of the way. Let a new crop of leadership through. Let us win this war, something that you have not been able to do. Well, this is Jake Donnelly, aka the Red, White, and Blue Jew. Thank you so much for listening to this long-winded kvetch. Please like, subscribe, comment. Try to get this to as many people with deep pockets as you can. I'm not saying fund me, although I am going to be incorporated as a 501c3. So, hey, if you want to do that, I'm saying try something new, because the old way didn't work and isn't working. So let's try to do this together. Let's try to do this differently. And I promise you, we will win this war. We just have to think how to fight differently. Okay, one last time. This is Jake Donnelly, aka the Red, White, and Blue Jew, saying, until next time, folks, see ya.